Well, I'm back with another absurdly original idea for a video. I did a double review of the first Elm Street movie and the 2010 remake by comparing them based on a five set of criteria. And I recently caught the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th. And since remakes are the du jour of the day, which is kind of redundant when you think about it, I decided to kind of do another comparison video in which we're going to take a look at the original Friday the 13th from 1980 and compare it with Friday the 13th from 2009 to see just overall, from a subjective standpoint, which was the better overall motion picture. Before I begin, let's just come out and say it. We're not exactly dealing with, Bergman or Kurosawa here with either of these films. I guess what I would consider mediocre films at best. I really wouldn't consider any of them classics in any regard, but they've got a legacy and they both have merits that are different in different ways. So, yeah, let's just get down to it. Alright, as far as script goes, the big difference between the two films is the original Friday the 13th was really more of a murder mystery because honestly you didn't know who the killer was until the last 2 minutes of the movie. Now compare that to Friday the 13th from 2009, in which it was more or less sort of a condensation of the first four Friday the 13th films into a single digestible granola bar of a motion picture. So yeah, the pacing I think in 2009 was a little bit faster, but at the same time I think the original Friday the 13th was a little bit more atmospheric. I kind of like the slower pace. It kind of built up, and I actually kind of like the whole Agatha Christie sort of aspect to the film, which kind of gave it not really a more dignified or classy vibe, but I thought overall it was just mildly more entertaining than the remake, which is just slam bang violence, violence, violence. So, criteria number one, I'm going to give the advantage to the original Friday the 13th. And I'm going to draw a hockey mask to denote that it wins in that category. Alright, acting. I gotta be honest, when you look at these films and compare them to their contemporaries, the acting in the flicks really isn't all that bad. I mean, go back and watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 84 version or the 2010 version, and you're going to see some absolutely phenomenally awful acting just all around. So while I'm not exactly saying, you got a Philip Seymour Hoffman quality acting going on in either of the films, I mean, just compared to their genre cohorts, they're not really that bad. And if I had to pick one, I think the acting, and don't get me wrong, I thought Betsy Palmer and Adrienne King did a pretty good job as the leads in the first film. I think that just overall the ensemble acting in the remake was just mildly more believable, which I know is kind of a hard thing to say about a Jason Voorhees movie. But I think overall that was just more comprehensively better, I guess. And I really can't go into too much more detail about why I consider that to be the case, but we'll give the nod there to the Redux. I like how Jason is like frowny over here, but kind of smiley. Yeah. Okay, direction. Once again, it's kind of a toss-up. I think that the original film with Sean Cunningham, it really was more or less an Agatha Christie film, basically. It was like 10 Little Indians, because as your standard, murder whodunit, who's the killer? Let's see if we can figure out the links. But what I really, really enjoyed about the film, which I really didn't pick up until recently, is it has almost like a pseudo-documentary vibe going on. I mean, there are points of the film where, if you kind of just like look back, it's kind of like watching an early Earl Morris movie, because everything is just so grainy and folksy and rustic, and yeah, it's very, very unique, especially for the time frame for most of the slasher films out there. The guy that did the remake, I admit, it wasn't a horrible job, but it was just an homage. It's the guy throwing stuff together and hoping that the really violent scenes could kind of pull it together. Whereas I think Sean Cunningham, he didn't really do an Alfred Hitchcock quality job with the film, but at least it had some merits. It had a pretty good pacing, and overall, I kind of like the way that movie unfurled more than the update. So with direction, I'm going to go with the original. Special effects. This one is going to be very controversial. The original Friday the 13th, of course, had the gore effects from Tom Savini, who is just about beloved by everybody. But even though he did a really good job, and it's considered one of the standout special effects jobs of early degenerate cinema in the 1980s, I think the special effects in 2009's version were just overall better. I mean, if you go back and watch the death scenes in the 1980 version, it's like, oh well, that's cool, but it's very standard. But the death scenes in 2009, oh my god, it was just insane. Like the special effects there, I know there's a lot of CGI, but who cares? What works is what works, and there were just some outstanding kills in that film, which I think totally outdo anything you see in the original. So controversial as it may be, I'm going to say that just in terms of sheer empirical quality, I think you'd have to give the nod to the remake. So as you can see, it is a tied ball game. What it all comes down to is overall quality. And like I said, this is very, very subjective. I don't think this is one of those things where, when you're comparing the original Elm Street to the remake of Elm Street, that it's just not even a contest. The original just destroys it in every way. I think that what they did with the Friday the 13th remake was really sort of average, leaning towards crappy, but at least they're able to kind of do something with it, which is more than you can say for most remakes, including a certain evil remake coming up very shortly, which we will never talk about again. So I guess I was mildly surprised. I mean, not that I liked it or anything, I was just kind of surprised. I would be really, really awful, and it was just kind of lame, but not super lame. So that's, I guess, a good thing? I don't know. But yeah, all that to say, I really like the original a little bit more. I don't think it's a great film in any respect, but just, with what it set out to do, and it had that low budget quality, and it had the whole pseudo documentary vibe going on. And, it really was the film that kind of started the slasher trend, much more than Halloween, I believe. Because Halloween had way too much plot and atmosphere and, restraint, whereas Friday the 13th got the thing rolling. Go out in the woods, have kids having sex, and then impalements galore. So yeah, I think just as a cinematic offering, there's probably more meat to the original. There's more stuff going on. You probably walk away with a little bit more. It's the pacing, I think, is better, and I think the style is a little bit more entertaining. Friday the 13th, the remake, kind of looks and feels like any slasher movie released by a mainstream company in the last 10 years. So I'm not seeing that much uniqueness. But with the original, I mean, it's pretty endearing, I think. It still has some charm all these years later. So, the tiebreaker, if I had to say just overall what would be the better motion picture from start to finish, all things taken into consideration, I would say the original Friday the 13th is still the superior film.